Hello, and welcome. If you're here, it likely means you've felt the weight of your own emotions, perhaps even been overwhelmed by them. Maybe there have been days when you seemed perfectly fine, and then suddenly, something small, a rude comment, a missed deadline, a flash of fear, completely hijacked your state of mind. It happens to all of us. The emotional storms don't discriminate. And yet, amidst that chaos, there exists a timeless philosophy. One that's helped countless people navigate life with greater clarity, peace, and strength. That philosophy is Stoicism. But don't worry, this isn't going to be a history lecture. We're not here to quote ancient thinkers without grounding their insights in something real, something human. Instead, this is a journey, one you and I will take together, into learning how to truly master our emotions. Not to suppress them or pretend they don't exist, but to understand them so deeply that they no longer have power over us. We'll learn how to pause before reacting, how to recognize our triggers, and how to cultivate a deep well of peace within ourselves that no one else can touch. These are not abstract lessons. They're practical, powerful tools that you can begin using today. Let me introduce you to someone. Let's call him Caleb. Caleb wasn't always in control. In fact, most of his life was ruled by emotional reactivity. He would flare up in anger when things didn't go his way. He would spiral into anxiety before job interviews or important meetings. He'd lie awake at night, replaying painful memories, letting fear and regret loop endlessly. But then something changed. He discovered the teachings of Stoicism, not as dogma, but as a set of tools, of habits, of perspectives. Over time, he transformed from being someone easily shaken by the world to someone who could walk through chaos with steady steps. The first lesson Caleb learned was perhaps the most liberating. Emotions themselves are not the enemy. What matters is our response. Emotions are natural, they are signals. The Stoics never taught us to banish our feelings. They taught us to master them. Think of it this way: a storm may come, but you don't have to let it knock you off course. You can learn to sail through it. Caleb started by paying close attention to his thoughts. Whenever he felt anger rising, he paused and asked himself, what exactly am I reacting to? What story am I telling myself? This questioning became a powerful habit. Instead of being swept away by emotion, he created space between stimulus and response. One of the most important insights Caleb adopted came from Seneca, who once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Caleb realized how often he was agonizing over things that hadn't happened or weren't happening anymore. He'd take a single moment of rejection and expand it into a whole identity crisis. But Stoicism taught him that it wasn't the event, it was his interpretation of it. So he practiced shifting perspective. Instead of saying, "This is a disaster," he'd say, "This is a challenge. What can I learn from it?" This mental reprogramming took time. Caleb treated it like training. Just like one practices martial arts or learns a new language, emotional mastery took repetition. He journaled every day, writing down what triggered him, how he reacted, and how he could do better next time. Over weeks and months, patterns emerged. He could see the traps his mind fell into. And with that awareness came freedom. One concept that helped him profoundly was what he called emotional distancing. When a situation made him angry or anxious, instead of diving headfirst into that emotion, he'd take a step back, sometimes literally. He'd ask, "Am I being a stoic right now? Or am I just reacting?" That small question created just enough room for him to choose a different path. He learned that he could feel something without being consumed by it. A rude comment didn't have to become a fight. A failure didn't have to define his self-worth. There was a powerful metaphor Caleb loved, of a sailor adjusting his sails when the wind changed. He realized that the winds of life, the circumstances, the unexpected, the pain, were beyond his control. But he could always adjust his sails. He could always decide how to respond. This wasn't easy at first. His brain, like all of ours, was wired to react impulsively. But Stoicism offered him the tools to reshape that wiring. Breathing exercises, mindfulness, visualization, these weren't just trendy self-help practices. They were techniques the Stoics used thousands of years ago. And they worked. One of the most important tools Caleb used was something he called the 5-second window. He discovered that when an emotion first arose, there was a very small window, just a few seconds, before it took control. In that gap, he had the chance to pause, breathe, and decide. Miss that window, and the emotion often took over. But if he caught it, even just once out of 5 times, it was a victory. He began practicing deliberately. He would go for drives in rush hour traffic just to train himself not to get frustrated. He'd engage in difficult conversations, not to argue, but to practice staying calm under pressure. And slowly, it began to work. That 5-second pause grew longer. His reactions became less impulsive, more thoughtful. He felt more in control, not of the world, but of himself. And that's what Stoicism is all about. Another cornerstone of Caleb's emotional transformation was the concept of the dichotomy of control. This idea, taught by Epictetus, emphasizes that we should focus only on what we can control and let go of what we cannot. Caleb used to spend hours worrying about things outside his influence, what others thought of him, how people would respond to his ideas, whether the future would unfold as he hoped. But Stoicism taught him to focus inward. He created a list of worries and divided them into 2 categories: what he could control and what he couldn't. This exercise alone lifted a huge weight off his chest. He started using his energy differently. Instead of fighting the waves, he learned to swim with purpose. If he couldn't control the rain, he could still choose to carry an umbrella. If someone disrespected him, he couldn't control their actions, but he could control his response. This shift gave him a sense of freedom. And over time, he built what he called an emotional fortress, a calm inner state that external events couldn't easily shake. Another technique Caleb adopted was something Marcus Aurelius practiced called premeditatio malorum, or premeditation of evils. Every morning, Caleb would visualize possible challenges for the day: rude clients, unexpected delays, harsh criticism. He didn't do this to become pessimistic but to prepare himself mentally. So when those things did happen, he wasn't surprised or thrown off. He was ready. This mental rehearsal was like emotional armor. And when paired with breathing techniques and mindfulness, it became a powerful tool for inner stability. In time, Caleb began to notice something beautiful. Emotions still came. He was still human, but they no longer dictated his actions. He could welcome anger, recognize it, then let it pass like a guest who visits but doesn't stay. He developed a mantra: "This feeling is temporary. It does not define me." That simple affirmation helped him detach from fleeting emotional states and remember who he was beneath them. Self-reflection became a nightly ritual. At the end of each day, Caleb would ask himself, "Where did I lose control today? Where did I respond well? How can I do better tomorrow?" This daily review wasn't about shame, it was about growth. It helped him spot patterns, catch recurring triggers, and reinforce the habits he wanted to build. Over time, he also learned to use logic to challenge emotion. When he felt overwhelmed with fear or sadness, he'd ask himself, "What evidence do I have for this feeling? What's the most realistic outcome?" Often, he found that his emotions were exaggerating the truth. By applying reason, he grounded himself. He also began recognizing cognitive distortions, things like black and white thinking or catastrophizing. And once he spotted them, he could change the narrative. He also found that combining mental practices with physical action helped even more. If he felt anxious, he'd take a brisk walk. If he was angry, he'd do deep breathing. If he felt stuck, he'd write in his journal. These small actions grounded him in reality and made emotional mastery feel more tangible. Perhaps one of the most surprising changes came through silence. Caleb learned to delay his reactions, not just by 5 seconds, but sometimes by an hour, or even a full day. He realized that many things that felt urgent in the moment no longer mattered after a little time passed. And in that space of silence, logic could rise. That delay became a superpower. It gave him perspective. It gave him peace. He also embraced discomfort on purpose. He'd place himself in minor stressful situations just to train his resilience. He saw every challenge as an opportunity to grow stronger. Every time he handled an emotion with grace instead of reaction, he reinforced a new identity, one rooted in calm, strength, and inner control. This daily emotional training became a way of life. In the mornings, he visualized challenges. In the evenings, he reflected on his responses. In the moment, he paused, breathed, and chose. It wasn't always perfect. He still stumbled, but every stumble was a lesson. And with each passing day, his emotional resilience deepened. As Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. Caleb took those words to heart. And over time, he built a life where his emotions no longer ruled him. Instead, they became signals, informative, but not in control. He had become the calm in the storm. And so can you. These lessons are not exclusive to ancient philosophers or people like Caleb. They are yours, too. The tools are simple but powerful. Pause before reacting. Shift your perspective. Focus on what you can control. Practice emotional distancing. Reflect daily. Challenge your thoughts with logic. And train yourself through small acts of discomfort. Start small. Begin today. The next time you feel a strong emotion rising, count to 5. Take a breath. Ask yourself, is this worth my peace? Most of the time, the answer will be no. And in that moment, you'll take a step toward emotional mastery. Thank you for walking this journey with me. May these Stoic principles bring you strength, calm, and resilience in every moment of your life. Remember, the storm will come, but you can always choose how to sail through it. Stay grounded, stay strong, and stay mindful. Until next time, take care. And thank you for reading.